I arrived at my mountain cabin with rental agents, dreaming of quiet earnings, and inside, my daughter-in-law is relaxing with her lover, uninhibited and indifferent. She threw down $5,000. For your silence, I nodded as if agreeing, and made one phone call. Not to my son, but to the one who would destroy her empire of lies. Betrayal is unforgivable. Revenge is cold calculation. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The drive up to the mountain house had been pleasant. Lisa Thornton sat in the passenger seat, her folder of rental documents balanced on her lap, talking about seasonal rates and the strong market for summer properties near Aspen. I listened, nodding occasionally, watching the pines thicken along the winding road. June sunlight filtered through the branches, warm and easy. When we turned into the driveway, I saw the car immediately. A silver Audi, unfamiliar, parked too close to the front steps. Not Gertrude's white BMW, not Troy's truck. The license plate meant nothing to me, but something in my chest tightened. "Expecting someone?" Lisa asked, her professional tone wavering slightly. "No." I put the car in park and sat there a moment, studying the Audi. Expensive. Recent model. The windows were tinted dark. I climbed out slowly, my knees stiff from the 2-hour drive. The house looked peaceful enough. Log exterior, weathered to a soft gray. The wraparound porch empty except for the rocking chairs I'd bought years ago. But the front door stood slightly ajar. I always locked it. Always. Lisa followed me up the steps, her heels clicking against the wood. I pushed the door wider and stepped into the cool dimness of the entryway. The living room opened before us, spacious and familiar, the stone fireplace dominating one wall, the leather furniture arranged exactly as I'd left it. Then I saw them. Gertrude sat on the couch, a blanket pulled hastily around her shoulders, her dark hair disheveled. A man I'd never seen before stood next to her, barefoot, his shirt unbuttoned, fumbling with his belt. 2 wine glasses sat on the coffee table, half empty, next to a bottle I recognized from my wine rack. Time did a strange thing. It slowed, stretched, made every detail sharp. The man's watch, gold, expensive, catching the light. The flush on Gertrude's face, not from embarrassment, but from being interrupted. The blanket slipping to reveal her bare shoulder. Nobody moved. Then Gertrude's face changed. Shock dissolved into something harder, more calculated. She stood, keeping the blanket wrapped around herself, and stepped forward, positioning herself between me and the stranger. "What are you doing here?" Her voice came out sharp, accusing. "You said you weren't coming until next month." I didn't answer right away. 30 years as a veterinarian had taught me that calm authority worked better than volume. I let my hands hang at my sides, kept my breathing even. Behind me, I heard Lisa shift her weight, the folder crinkling in her grip. "This is my house," I said quietly. "That doesn't give you the right to barge in unannounced," Gertrude shot back, her chin lifting. The stranger, young, maybe 35, athletic build, grabbed his shoes from beside the couch and moved toward the back of the room. His hands shook as he tried to put them on while standing. He wouldn't look at me. "Whatever you think you saw," Gertrude continued, her voice dropping into a warning, "you need to forget it. This is none of your business." I said nothing. My eyes tracked the stranger as he stumbled toward the hallway that led to the back door. Gertrude stepped closer to me, blocking my view. "I'm serious, Wilfred. Stay out of my life." The back door opened and slammed. Through the window, I watched the stranger sprint toward the Audi, nearly dropping his keys twice before he got the door open. Gertrude's expression softened, just slightly. She tilted her head, adopting a different tone. Reasonable, almost gentle. "Look, I know this looks bad, but Troy doesn't need to know about this. It would only hurt him." That much was true. The image of my son's face when he found out made my stomach turn. "You're right," I said, my voice flat. "It would hurt him." She relaxed a fraction, misunderstanding. "Exactly. So we're on the same page." Behind me, Lisa cleared her throat. "Mr. Myers, should I wait outside?" I didn't turn around. "Stay. I need a witness." Gertrude's face hardened instantly, the softness evaporating. "A witness? For what? You wouldn't dare tell Troy. He'd never believe you anyway." She was probably right about that, too. Troy adored her. had since the day they met 8 years ago at some charity auction. She'd swept into his life like a force of nature, beautiful and confident, and completely certain of her worth. I'd had my doubts from the beginning. The way she measured everything in monetary terms, the way she spoke to service workers, the slight curl of her lip when Troy mentioned his teaching salary. But I'd kept them to myself. What father wants to be the one who says his son's choice is wrong? Now I stood in my own house, watching her calculate, watching her decide how to handle me. The wine glasses still sat on the table. Evidence, simple, undeniable evidence. I felt something shift inside me. Not rage exactly. Something colder, more methodical. The same feeling I got when I had to put together a diagnosis from scattered symptoms, when I had to see the pattern nobody else could see. Wilfred, Gertrude's voice had steel in it now. Whatever you're thinking, stop. Think about Troy. Think about your grandson. You want to blow up their lives because you walked in at the wrong moment? I met her eyes. She stared back, unflinching. Behind all that beauty and confidence, behind the designer clothes and the practiced charm, I saw exactly what she was. Not complicated, not conflicted. Just someone who'd been caught and was now working out how to avoid consequences. I'm not the one who blew anything up, I said. She blinked, thrown for just a second, then recovered. Fine. Be self-righteous. But if you tell Troy some twisted version of what you think you saw, I'll make sure he knows you've been trying to turn him against me for years. Outside, the Audi's engine roared to life. Tires spun on gravel, and the car fishtailed slightly before straightening and disappearing down the drive. Gertrude watched it go, her shoulders tense. When she turned back to me, her expression had shifted again, calculating, measuring. We should talk, she said, privately. Gertrude moved to the glass doors that led to the terrace, sliding one open. Mountain air rushed in, cool and pine-scented. She stepped outside, the blanket still wrapped around her like armor, and waited for me to follow. I glanced at Lisa. She stood frozen by the entrance, her face carefully blank, the folder of rental documents crushed against her chest like a shield. I'll be right here, she said quietly. I nodded and walked out to the terrace. The view stretched for miles. Pine forests sloping down into valleys, distant peaks still touched with snow. Gertrude stood at the railing, her back to me, her hair lifting slightly in the breeze. You're going to tell him, aren't you? She said without turning around. Should I lie to my son? She spun to face me then, her eyes bright with something between fury and desperation. Lying and protecting are different things. You tell Troy what you saw, and you destroy him. You destroy our family. Is that what you want? I didn't destroy anything. You keep saying that. She laughed, sharp and bitter. Like you're innocent in all this. You've never liked me, Wilfred. Never thought I was good enough for Troy. This is just your excuse to finally drive us apart. I kept my face neutral, my hands loose at my sides. She was probing, testing, trying to find the angle that would work. I'd seen this before in frightened animals, the ones who bit because they didn't know any other way to respond to threat. Have I? I asked. What? Have I tried to turn him against you? The question seemed to confuse her. She opened her mouth, closed it, recalibrated. When she spoke again, her voice had changed completely. Reasonable, almost businesslike. Look, we're both adults here. She crossed her arms, the blanket slipping, to reveal she'd pulled on her shirt. I'll give you $5,000. Cash? Transfer? However you want it. I waited. For what? I asked finally. For giving me time to handle this my way. Troy deserves to hear this from me, not from you. $5,000? Not a fortune, but significant enough to seem serious. She thought she understood me, thought I was simple enough to be bought, old enough to prefer avoiding conflict, concerned enough about Troy to take the easy way out. 5,000, I repeated, letting the words hang in the air. Her face brightened. Yes, that's fair, isn't it? For your discretion? I nodded once, slowly. Not agreement, exactly. Just acknowledgement that I'd heard her. Relief flooded her expression. Good. I knew you'd be reasonable. I'll have it transferred by tomorrow. You'll have your money, and Troy won't have to deal with any of this unpleasantness. Unpleasantness. That's what she called it. as if she'd spilled wine on the carpet instead of betraying my son in his father's house. "I need to make a phone call," I said. She waved a hand, dismissive. "Of course, whatever you need." I walked back inside, past Lisa, who hadn't moved from her spot near the door. She gave me a small, tight smile, sympathy mixed with acute discomfort. I pulled my phone from my pocket and stepped into the far corner of the living room, near the fireplace. Patrick Doyle answered on the third ring. "Wilfred, long time. What can I do for you?" "Patrick, it's a family matter, legal implications. I need to meet with you tomorrow, if possible." His tone shifted, professional concern replacing casual friendliness. "Of course. What kind of legal matter? Estate planning?" "No." I kept my voice low, but didn't bother to hide it completely. Through the glass doors I could see Gertrude watching me, trying to read my body language. I have a witness, and I need to know my options. Silence on the other end. Then, "I see. How about 9 tomorrow morning? My office?" "That works." "Wilfred," Patrick said carefully, "should I prepare anything specific?" "Family law, infidelity, evidence documentation." Another pause. "I'll be ready. See you at 9. I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my pocket. When I turned, Gertrude was standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. She'd changed, fully dressed now in jeans and a silk blouse, her hair smoothed back. The transformation was impressive, from caught mistress to composed woman in a matter of minutes. "Everything all right?" she asked, her voice careful. "Fine." "Who was that?" "My attorney." Her face went very still. "Your attorney? Why would you need to call your attorney?" I met her eyes, let the silence stretch, watched understanding dawn, then denial, then a flash of something close to panic. "Wait." She stepped fully into the room. "Wait, you said we had an agreement." I nodded. I didn't say yes. "That's the same thing." "Is it?" Her hands clenched into fists. "You can't do this. I offered you money. I offered you a solution that protects everyone." "It protects you," I said quietly. "Not everyone." She moved closer, her voice dropping into a hiss. "If you tell Troy, he'll hate you for it. He'll think you're lying. He'll think you're jealous of our happiness. And if by some chance he believes you, it'll destroy him. Either way, you lose him. Is that what you want?" I thought about Troy, my son, brilliant kid, even now at 34. High school history teacher, loved by his students. Patient and kind, sometimes to a fault. He believed the best in people. It was his greatest strength, and I was beginning to realize his greatest vulnerability. "What I want," I said slowly, "is for my son to know the truth about who he married." "The truth?" Gertrude's laugh came out sharp, almost manic. "The truth is that I made one mistake, one afternoon, and you're going to use it to ruin everything I've built. You built it on lies. Everyone lies, Wilfred. Everyone pretends. That's what marriage is." Lisa made a small sound from the doorway. Not quite a gasp, not quite a cough. Gertrude's head whipped toward her, seeming to remember for the first time that we had an audience. "You should go," Gertrude said to Lisa, her voice cold. Lisa looked at me. I shook my head slightly. "She's staying," I said. Gertrude's face went white, then red. "This is my home, too. I have a right to privacy." "In my house?" I kept my voice level. "With my son's money? Entertaining your boyfriend on my furniture?" She had no answer for that, just stood there, trembling with rage or fear or both, her carefully constructed composure finally cracking. I turned to Lisa. "Let's go. I think we're done here." Lisa nodded quickly, relief plain on her face. She pulled open the front door and practically fled outside. Before I could follow, Gertrude grabbed my arm. Her grip was strong, desperate. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't do this. I'll do anything. Name your price." I looked down at her hand on my sleeve, then up at her face, saw genuine fear there now, beneath all the calculation and manipulation. But I also saw something else, the absolute certainty that if I gave her any opening, any weakness to exploit, she'd use it. "Let go," I said quietly. She released me, her hand falling to her side. I walked out into the afternoon sunshine, leaving her standing alone in the living room. Behind me I heard glass shatter, a wine glass maybe, or the bottle, thrown against the stone fireplace. The sound echoed through the mountain silence. sharp and final. Lisa was already in the car, seatbelt on, staring straight ahead. I climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine. Neither of us spoke as I backed down the driveway and turned onto the narrow road. The house disappeared behind the trees within seconds, swallowed by pines and shadow. I barely touched dinner that night. By dawn, I was dressed and ready for the drive to Aspen. Button-down shirt, pressed slacks, the watch Troy gave me for my 65th birthday. I wanted Patrick to see me as competent, not some emotional old man chasing shadows. The notebook sat on the passenger seat, filled with details I'd written down after midnight when sleep wouldn't come. Timeline, observations, the color of Darren's watch, the brand of wine, everything. Patrick Doyle's office sat above a coffee shop in downtown Aspen, wood-paneled and lined with law books that looked actually read, not decorative. Family photos covered one wall, Patrick with his daughters at ski slopes, at graduations. Certificates hung beside them, neat and professional. He rose when I entered, shook my hand firmly. "Wilfred, thanks for coming in. Coffee?" "No, thank you." We sat across from each other, his desk between us covered in legal pads and manila folders. He picked up a pen, clicked it once. "Walk me through yesterday," he said. "Start from when you arrived at the property." I told him everything. The drive with Lisa, the unfamiliar car, entering the living room and seeing them, Gertrude's reaction, her words, the stranger fleeing, Lisa standing witness to all of it. Patrick wrote steadily, occasionally circling something on his pad. When I mentioned the $5,000, his pen stopped mid-stroke. "She offered you money?" "For my discretion. Said Troy deserved to hear it from her, not from me." Patrick set down his pen. "That's important. That's consciousness of guilt. She knew what she'd done was wrong, and she tried to buy your silence. I didn't take it. I know, but her offering matters." He pulled a folder from the stack beside him, opened it. "I did some preliminary work after your call. Since you've used me for property transactions before, I still had authorization to access certain financial records." He slid papers across the desk. Bank statements, credit card bills, a mortgage document. "When did Troy take this mortgage?" I scanned the page, saw the amount, felt something cold settle in my stomach. $620,000. "March," I said slowly. "He mentioned it briefly, said they were refinancing." "This isn't refinancing. This is new debt at 6.8%. "Where did the money go?" "I don't know." Patrick pulled out more papers, spreading them like cards in a hand. His finger tracked down columns of numbers, stopping at highlighted sections. "Look at these charges. The Peaks Resort, 3 times last month. Each stay charged to your son's credit card." Troy was at work. I remembered him mentioning it. He had a project in Denver that kept him away overnight. "The charges are local." Patrick's voice stayed level, but his eyes were sharp. "Someone used that card while he was gone." The numbers blurred slightly. I forced myself to focus. $8,000 last month alone. Hotels. Restaurants I'd never heard Troy mention. Gifts from jewelry stores. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. "Based on the spending patterns?" "At least 6 months, possibly longer." 6 months. While Troy worked late hours teaching history to teenagers, while he worried about budget cuts and curriculum changes, Gertrude had been spending his money on another man. "I have a witness," I said. "Lisa saw everything. Isn't that enough?" Patrick leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "For a conversation between us, yes. For a court case, no. Colorado judges want documentation, photographs, financial records showing affair-related expenses, electronic communications if possible. How long does gathering that take? Weeks, maybe a month if she's careful." A month. 4 more weeks of watching Troy live in ignorance while I sat on this knowledge. "I need to tell him," I said. "No." Patrick's voice went firm. "You cannot tell Troy yet. If you do, Gertrude will know we're building a case. She'll stop meeting her lover, delete communications, move money. We need her to feel safe." "You want me to lie to my son?" "I want you to protect him." "There's a difference." I stared at the papers spread across the desk. Evidence of betrayal, quantified in dollars and dates. Troy trusted me. Always had. And now I was supposed to smile at him, make small talk, pretend everything was fine while his wife dismantled his life piece by piece. What do I need to do? I asked finally. Patrick pulled a business card from his desk drawer, not from the top, but from deeper in the stack. He set it in front of me. Marcus Chen, former detective, now private investigator. Discreet. He won't approach subjects directly, just documents their activities. Patrick tapped the card. I've used him before. He knows what courts need. I picked up the card. Simple design. Name, number, nothing else. This feels wrong, I said. It is wrong, but it's also necessary. Patrick gathered the financial statements, sliding them back into the folder. Gertrude has had months to establish her pattern. We need to match that with documented evidence. Otherwise it becomes, he said, she said, and she'll claim you're jealous or confused or trying to break up their marriage. I don't want to break up their marriage. She already did that. Then help me prove it properly. I left Patrick's office an hour later with Marcus Chen's card in my pocket and a strategy that felt like swallowing glass. Act normal. Don't alert Gertrude. Let Troy remain happy and oblivious while we built an irrefutable case. The drive home took forever. Mountains that had looked beautiful yesterday now just felt like walls, trapping me in this impossible situation. My phone rang as I hit the highway. Troy's name lit up the screen. I almost didn't answer, almost let it go to voicemail. But that would be unusual, and unusual meant questions. Hey, son, I said, keeping my voice steady. Dad, just checking in. We still on for fishing next month? Absolutely. Great. Gertrude's been amazing lately. She's planning this whole trip, found us a guide and everything. He sounded so happy, so completely unaware. I think she really gets how important these trips are to me, to us. I gripped the steering wheel, watching the yellow line disappear beneath my hood. That's good, Troy. That's really good. You okay? You sound tired. Just a long drive. I'll call you tomorrow. After he hung up, I drove another 10 miles before pulling into a rest stop. Sat there with the engine off, staring at the business card in my hand. Marcus Chen, private investigator. I made the call. The next 4 days felt like 4 weeks. I went through my normal routine. Morning coffee at the kitchen table, afternoon walks around the neighborhood, but everything was hollow. Patrick's words kept cycling through my mind. We need her to feel safe. So I did nothing, sent no messages, made no calls to Troy beyond our usual weekly check-in, let the silence stretch. On day 5, my phone rang. Lisa Thornton. Mr. Myers? I hope I'm not overstepping. Not at all. The man from the mountain house. I know who he is. She paused, then continued quickly, as if she needed to say it before she changed her mind. Darren Vaughn. He's a ski instructor at Aspen Highlands. One of my clients mentioned him a few months ago. Said he was excellent with their teenage daughter. How do you know it's the same man? I saw him yesterday at the Wild Fig. He was with Gertrude. I recognized him immediately. The Wild Fig, an upscale restaurant in downtown Aspen. Expensive. Public. Thank you, Lisa. I keep thinking about what I saw, about your son. Her voice tightened. I have 3 boys. If someone knew my husband was being betrayed and didn't tell me, I'd be furious. But I also understand why you're doing this carefully. After she hung up, I sat with the information. Darren Vaughn, ski instructor, meeting Gertrude in public restaurants, confident enough in their secrecy to risk being seen. I called Marcus Chen that afternoon. We met in a grocery store parking lot, neutral territory. He drove a gray sedan, forgettable, and he looked exactly like someone who'd spent 20 years in law enforcement. Gray crew cut, weathered face, eyes that missed nothing. Patrick briefed me on the basics, Marcus said, settling into the passenger seat of my car. Your daughter-in-law affair, need documentation for divorce proceedings? I handed him the notebook where I'd written everything down. He flipped through it methodically, nodding occasionally. The witness is good. Real estate agent, no personal stake. Professional reputation to protect? He tapped the page where I'd noted Gertrude's bribe offer. This, too, shows awareness and attempt to obstruct. What do you need from me? Nothing except to stay out of the way. You're the client. I'm the professional. You try to help. You risk exposing the investigation. He pulled out his phone, showing me examples of his work. Time-stamped photographs, detailed activity logs. I'll document meetings, locations, times. If there are electronic communications, I'll find them legally. If they're meeting at hotels, I'll get confirmation of room bookings. How long? Depends on their pattern. If they're meeting regularly, 2 weeks minimum. If they're being careful, maybe a month. A month? Another month of Troy living in a lie. Whatever it takes, I said. Marcus left with his notebook copy of my observations and Lisa's information about Darren Vaughn. I drove home and tried to figure out how to fill the next several weeks with normalcy while my son's marriage disintegrated under microscopic observation. That evening, Troy called again. "Dad, you're not going to believe this. Gertrude made my favorite dinner tonight, that pot roast you used to make. She even called you for the recipe." She hadn't called me for any recipe. "That's wonderful, son. She's really been making an effort lately. It's like we're newlyweds again," he laughed, happy and oblivious. "I know you and she haven't always seen eye to eye, but I really think she's trying to build bridges. She even asked if we could invite you over for dinner next week." My hand tightened on the phone. Building bridges, creating witnesses to their happy marriage. Gertrude was smarter than I'd given her credit for. "I'd like that," I managed. "Perfect. I'll have her call you to set it up." After the call ended, I stood at my kitchen window, watching darkness settle over the neighborhood. Lights came on in houses up and down the street, families gathering for dinner, normal evenings, normal lives. I thought about the $5,000 Gertrude had offered. Hush money, the price of my discretion. She believed she understood me, believed she could buy my silence or manipulate my concern for Troy into inaction. She was wrong. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "First set of documentation complete." "Meeting?" We met at a coffee shop on the edge of town early morning before the rush. Marcus slid an envelope across the table. Inside were photographs, time-stamped, high-resolution, damning. Gertrude and Darren at the Wild Fig, seated close, her hand on his. The Peaks Resort, both entering together, 40 minutes apart to avoid suspicion. A rental property I didn't recognize. Darren's car parked outside for 3 hours while Troy was at work. "She's not being careful," Marcus said quietly. "Meeting him twice a week, sometimes 3 times, always during your son's work hours. Same locations, same patterns. It's almost like she thinks she's invincible." "Because she paid me off," I said. "She thinks I took her deal." "Did you?" "No." Marcus nodded, unsurprised. "I'll continue surveillance. Need at least 2 more weeks to establish consistent pattern. Courts like consistency proves its ongoing behavior, not one-time mistake." I studied the photographs. Gertrude looked happy in them, relaxed, more animated than I'd ever seen her with Troy. "There's one more thing," Marcus said, pulling out his phone. He showed me a financial transfer record. $5,000 deposited into an account under your name. She actually followed through. I never gave her my account information. She didn't need it. She used your property records from the mortgage filing. It's all public information." He put his phone away. "Which means when this goes to court, there's now a paper trail of her attempting to bribe you. She incriminated herself." The coffee shop door opened, bringing in a burst of cold air and 2 women laughing about something. Normal morning, normal lives. Everything around me continuing as if the world hadn't just rearranged itself into something unrecognizable. "Keep going," I told Marcus. "I need enough evidence that there's no question. No room for her to manipulate the narrative." "You'll have it." I drove home with the envelope tucked into my jacket pocket, carrying proof of what I already knew, but hadn't wanted to believe. Gertrude wasn't just unfaithful. She was systematic about it, calculated. She'd created a routine of betrayal, scheduled and maintained like any other appointment in her calendar. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Troy's voice when he talked about her making pot roast, about him believing she was building bridges while she was actually building alibis. I thought about justice and revenge and whether there was any real difference between them. Patrick called it protecting my son. Marcus called it documenting evidence. Gertrude would call it whatever she needed to call it to escape consequences. I called it the truth. And the truth, I was learning, required patience and precision and a willingness to let someone you loved walk through fire just long enough to prove they'd been burned. 2 more weeks, Marcus had said. I could wait 2 more weeks. I'd wait as long as it took. 3 days crawled by before I made my move. Marcus had sent his latest surveillance report. Gertrude's routine was clockwork. The Daily Grind coffee shop every Tuesday and Thursday morning at 10. Always alone. Always at the corner table near the window. Tuesday morning I dressed carefully. Jeans instead of slacks. Flannel shirt instead of button-down. The newspaper tucked under my arm. A prop, but a convincing one. I needed to look casual, harmless. An old man getting his morning coffee. Nothing more. The Daily Grind sat 3 blocks from a fitness center Gertrude frequented. Marcus had photographed her leaving the gym and walking directly here twice last week. I arrived at 9:55, ordered a black coffee, and scanned the room as if looking for a seat. She sat exactly where Marcus said she would. Corner table, laptop open. Coffee in a ceramic mug, not paper. She planned to stay a while. I let recognition cross my face slowly, then approached with what I hoped looked like genuine surprise. "Gertrude, I thought that was you. Mind if I sit for a moment?" She stiffened, her hand tightening around her mug. "Wilfred, I didn't expect to see you here. Best coffee in town." I pulled out the chair across from her, moved slowly, unthreatening. "I've been coming here for years. You? It's convenient, close to the gym." Silence stretched between us. She studied my face, looking for anger or judgment. I kept my expression neutral, tired, slightly distracted, exactly how I'd practiced in the mirror that morning. "About last week at the mountain house," she began. I waved it off, setting my coffee down. "Water under the bridge. I've been thinking, and I realize I overreacted. You're right. You're adults. It's not my business." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Really? Really. I'm too old to get involved in complicated situations. Live and let live. That's what I say now." I watched her shoulders drop a fraction, saw her fingers relax their grip on the mug. She wanted to believe me, needed to believe me. "You know," I continued, adopting a slightly conspiratorial tone, "in my generation, we had our share of mistakes. We just handled things more quietly. Different times." "I appreciate you saying that." Her voice softened. "I know it looked bad. What matters is Troy's happy, and he seems happy, so who am I to rock the boat?" She actually smiled then, small but genuine. The transformation was remarkable, from defensive to almost friendly, in less than 5 minutes. We talked for another 10 minutes about nothing important. The weather, the coffee shop's new pastries, Troy's students at the high school. I kept my tone light, grandfatherly, harmless. When I checked my watch and stood to leave, I delivered the line I'd been rehearsing. "Anyway, I should get going. Heading up to the mountains this afternoon. Going to spend a few days fishing, clear my head." "That sounds nice. Where?" I pulled out my phone, showed her a photo I'd taken 3 years ago of a mountain lake, pine trees reflected in still water. "Little lake, I know. No cell service, no distractions. Just me and the trout." "Enjoy it." She was fully relaxed now, her laptop forgotten, leaning back in her chair. "You deserve some peace." I paid for both our coffees on the way out, waved goodbye through the window, drove 3 blocks before pulling into a grocery store parking lot and sitting there, hands gripping the steering wheel, breathing slowly through my nose. The performance had worked. Every smile, every casual phrase, every carefully chosen word, she'd believed all of it, and the disgust I felt at having to be pleasant to her, at pretending to condone what she'd done, that would fuel what came next. At home, I spread Marcus's surveillance photos across my desk. 2 weeks of documentation. Gertrude and Darren at restaurants, entering hotels. His car parked outside the rental property. Time-stamped, geotagged, undeniable. I picked up my phone and called Marcus. "Marcus, Wilfred Myers. I need you to increase surveillance frequency starting today." "Something specific happen?" "I just gave the subject reason to believe she's not being watched. She'll be less careful now." A pause. Then, "Understood. I'll add evening coverage and weekend monitoring." Next call went to Patrick Doyle. "The coffee shop meeting went as planned," I said. "She thinks I'm going fishing for several days. Thinks I've accepted the situation." "Good." Patrick's voice carried approval. "How soon can Marcus deliver the next round of documentation?" "He says 7 days of increased surveillance should be enough. After that, we'll have everything we need. Then we move to phase 2. I'll prepare the preliminary divorce documents. When you're ready to tell Troy, we'll need to move quickly. Once Gertrude knows we have evidence, she'll start transferring assets, emptying accounts. We want everything documented and frozen before she has a chance to react. How quickly can that happen? If we file the moment Troy agrees, 72 hours, maybe less. I hung up and stood at my office window, watching afternoon light angle through the trees. Somewhere across town, Gertrude was probably calling Darren, telling him the coast was clear. The old man bought it. We're safe. They weren't safe. They were being documented with professional precision, every movement cataloged, every meeting recorded. And in 7 days, I'd have enough evidence to leave no doubt, no room for manipulation, no way for her to twist the narrative. My phone buzzed, text from Marcus. Subject just left coffee shop, heading toward address on Riverside. That's Vaughn's apartment. I texted back, document everything. The week I supposedly spent fishing would be the most productive of my investigation. While Gertrude thought I was unreachable in the mountains, Marcus would be everywhere she went, a ghost she'd never see. I opened a new document on my computer and titled it Timeline, Evidence Compilation. Started typing dates, locations, activities. Building the case one entry at a time, methodical and thorough, exactly like I'd done 30 years ago when documenting medical histories for difficult diagnoses. The difference was that animals couldn't lie to themselves about their symptoms. Gertrude had built her whole life around lies, and now I was going to document every single one. The week I supposedly spent fishing was the most productive of my investigation. While Gertrude thought I was unreachable in the mountains, Marcus worked around the clock. His report arrived via encrypted email exactly 7 days later. I printed it, laid the pages across my desk in chronological order. 8 meetings over 7 days. 8 separate occasions where Gertrude met Darren Vaughn, sometimes for lunch, twice for overnight hotel stays, once at his apartment for 4 hours while Troy was teaching summer school sessions. The photographs told their own story. Time stamps in the corners. Gertrude and Darren entering the Glenwood Inn 30 miles from Aspen. Checking in under false names, Mr. and Mrs. Vaughn, according to the registration receipt Marcus had somehow obtained. Her car parked at Darren's apartment complex on a Tuesday afternoon, the two of them at an outdoor cafe, holding hands across the table. I studied each image with clinical detachment, the way I used to examine x-rays for fractures that weren't immediately obvious. Every photo was evidence. Every timestamp was proof of pattern, not coincidence. Marcus had included credit card statements showing charges at the hotels, restaurants, even a jewelry store where Gertrude had purchased something expensive on Troy's card. The total for the week alone exceeded $4,000. I created 3 complete sets of documentation. One went into a fireproof safe in my office. One into a safety deposit box at my bank. The third I sealed in an envelope addressed to Patrick Doyle, with instructions to open it if anything happened to me. Redundancy. That's what mattered now. Gertrude was smart, calculating. If she discovered what I knew, she'd try to destroy evidence, manipulate records, create her own narrative, but she couldn't destroy what she didn't know existed. At the bank, I ran into Raymond Cole, an old friend who'd become manager there 15 years ago. He saw me with a large envelope, raised his eyebrows. Something important? Family documents, just being careful. He walked me to the safety deposit area, made small talk while I locked everything away. As we headed back toward the lobby, he paused, glanced around, then spoke quietly. Wilfred, I probably shouldn't mention this, but Gertrude withdrew $15,000 last week from the joint account she has with Troy. I stopped walking. 15,000? Cash. Said she was buying a car from a private seller. Raymond's face showed concern, but the way she handled it, I've seen people move money before they run. Just thought you should know. Does Troy know about the withdrawal? She's on the account. It's legal. I can't notify him unless he specifically asks about account activity. After Raymond returned to his office, I sat in my car and considered the implications. 15,000 in cash, either funding Darren or preparing an exit strategy. Either way, it proved what I'd suspected. This wasn't just an affair. This was calculated, premeditated exploitation. That evening, my phone rang. Troy's name on the screen. Dad, you're back from fishing. How was it? Quiet, peaceful. Caught some good-sized trout. Wish I could have joined you. Listen, weird question. Did you see Gertrude downtown last week? She mentioned running into you at a coffee shop. I paused, choosing my words carefully. I did, actually. Thursday morning before I left. Just briefly. She said you two had a nice conversation, that you seemed different. More accepting, she said. We're all adults, Troy. Past is past. That's good. Really good. He sounded relieved. Hey, she also mentioned she told you about her Denver trip last month. The one to see her friend, Marissa. I hadn't heard about any Denver trip from Gertrude, but Marcus's records showed hotel charges in Aspen during that time frame, dates when Troy thought she was in Denver. Right, I said carefully, letting the word hang. Only, I could have sworn she said it was in May, but you guys talked about it being in April. I said nothing. Let him work through his own confusion. Sometimes the best manipulation was simply stepping back and letting people question what they thought they knew. Anyway, Troy continued, his voice carrying something I hadn't heard before, uncertainty. I'm probably mixing up the dates. Never mind. You sound tired, son. Yeah, long day. We'll talk soon, okay? After he hung up, I sat in the growing darkness of my living room, phone still in my hand. The seed had been planted. Not by me directly. I'd simply allowed him to stumble into his own doubts. But now he was questioning, wondering. The first hairline crack in the FA aid Gertrude had built. My phone rang again 2 hours later. Troy again. Dad, I need to ask you something. When you saw Gertrude at the coffee shop, did she mention anything about me? About us? She said you were happy, that you two were doing well. Did she seem nervous? Off somehow? I thought about the right answer. The truthful answer would be yes. She'd been defensive, tense, calculating. But saying that directly would reveal too much. She seemed like herself, I said finally. I asked her about the Denver date thing, about whether it was April or May. His voice dropped. She got really defensive. Said I was questioning her integrity, that I never used to doubt her like this. But I wasn't trying to fight. I just wanted to clarify the date. People get defensive when they're stressed, I offered, keeping my tone neutral. Yeah, maybe. He didn't sound convinced. It's just, lately, little things aren't adding up. She mentioned lunch with someone last week, but when I asked about it today, she said she'd never mentioned it. I feel like I'm losing my mind. You're not losing your mind. How do you know? Because you're one of the most rational people I know. If something feels wrong, there's probably a reason. Silence stretched across the line. I could hear him breathing, thinking, wrestling with suspicions he didn't want to have. I love her, Dad. I know you do. But what if... He stopped, started again. What if she's not who I think she is? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implications neither of us was ready to fully explore. Then you deserve to know the truth, I said quietly. Yeah. His voice sounded hollow. Yeah, I do. After we hung up, I pulled out Marcus's report again, studied the timeline. 8 meetings in 7 days. $15,000 withdrawn in cash. Denver trip that never happened. Defensive responses when questioned. The pattern was clear, comprehensive, damning. Patrick had said we needed overwhelming evidence. Said Troy needed to see proof so complete that Gertrude couldn't manipulate her way out. We were almost there. Maybe 1 more week of documentation, then we'd have everything required for divorce proceedings that would leave her with nothing. But listening to Troy's voice tonight, the confusion, the hurt, the beginning awareness that something fundamental in his life was a lie, I wondered if another week was necessary or just prolonging his suffering. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Subject meeting. Vaughn tomorrow, 2 p.m. River Calf, should I document? I typed back. Document everything, we're almost done. 1 more week. Then I'd give Troy the truth, complete and irrefutable, and Gertrude would finally face consequences she couldn't buy or manipulate her way out of. The call came 2 days later, Tuesday morning while I was drinking coffee and reviewing Marcus's latest surveillance report. Troy's name on the screen. I answered, expecting our usual check-in. Instead, his voice came through tight and angry. Dad, what's going on? Gertrude says you've been following her. My hand tightened on the coffee mug. Following her? She's upset. Really upset. She says you've been making weird comments, questioning where she's been. She thinks you might be Struggling with some things. The word hung there, weighted with implications I couldn't quite grasp yet. Struggling, I repeated. Memory issues. Age-related stuff. She's worried about you. His voice softened slightly, protective instinct kicking in. Dad, is everything okay? Because if you're having problems, we can get you help. There's no shame in... My mind is perfectly fine. Then why is Gertrude so upset? She came home in tears yesterday. Said you've been acting paranoid, questioning her about places she's been, times she's been there. She mentioned the Denver confusion as an example. Denver? Of course. Turn my strategic seed planting into evidence of cognitive decline. Gertrude was smarter than I'd given her credit for. Strike first. Control the narrative. Paint me as unreliable before I could present any evidence. I need to come over, Troy said. We need to talk about this. After he hung up, I moved quickly. The USB drives went into the safe. Marcus's reports, surveillance photographs, financial documents, everything hidden. I brewed fresh coffee, set out 2 mugs, arranged the living room to look exactly as it always had. Normal, unthreatening, the home of a rational, clear-minded man. Troy arrived within the hour. He looked exhausted, his teacher's casual clothes rumpled, dark circles under his eyes. He stood in my doorway as if uncertain whether to hug me or interrogate me. Come in, I said quietly. We sat across from each other in the living room, me in my armchair, him on the sofa, the same positions we'd occupied 1,000 times for conversations about school, work, life. But this felt different, heavier. She mentioned you got confused about Denver, Troy began, his voice careful, gentle. Said you claimed she'd been there when she hadn't. I said I might have misunderstood. That's different from confusion. Is it? Dad, be honest with me. Have you been feeling off lately? Forgetting things? Because it's nothing to be ashamed of. We can. My mind is perfectly clear. Clearer than it's been in years. He studied my face, looking for signs of whatever Gertrude had convinced him to look for. Confusion, disorientation, the fog of declining age. Then explain why she's so upset, why she thinks you're harassing her. I took a breath, chose my words with surgical precision. Troy, your wife is lying to you. About where she goes, about what she does, about who she's with. His face hardened immediately. That's a serious accusation. Do you have any proof? Yes. Then show me. Not yet. You're not ready to see it yet. He stood abruptly, started pacing. Not ready? I'm your son. If you have something to say about my wife, say it. Show me whatever evidence you think you have. If I show you now, while you're angry and defensive, you won't see the truth. You'll find reasons to doubt it, to explain it away. You're talking in riddles. This isn't like you. No, this is exactly like me. Patient, methodical, protecting the people I love. He stopped pacing, turned to face me fully. His expression was torn, love and frustration warring across his features. Gertrude was in tears last night. Real tears. She said she doesn't know what she did to make you distrust her. She said she's tried so hard to build a relationship with you, but you've never accepted her. My hand moved involuntarily toward my study, where the safe was, where the proof sat waiting. I caught myself, but Troy noticed. What? He demanded. Nothing. Just thinking. About what? About how people cry for many reasons, sometimes from hurt, sometimes from fear of being caught. Caught at what? I met his eyes directly. Come back in 3 days. I'll have everything ready. 3 days? Why 3 days? Because that's when everything will be prepared. Documents, evidence, everything you need to see the truth clearly. Why not now? Because right now, you're not ready to accept what I have to show you. In 3 days, you will be. He stood there, hands clenched at his sides, clearly torn between demanding answers and trusting my judgment. Finally, he shook his head. I don't know what to believe. Gertrude was convincing. Really convincing. She's had practice, I said quietly. What's that supposed to mean? 3 days, Troy. Then you'll understand everything. He moved toward the door, stopped with his hand on the knob, turned back to face me. Dad, if you're wrong about this, if you're making accusations based on confusion or paranoia, it could destroy my marriage. Do you understand that? I understand perfectly. Then you better be absolutely certain. I am. He left without another word. I watched through the window as he sat in his truck for several minutes before starting the engine. Even from this distance, I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he gripped the steering wheel. When his taillights finally disappeared around the corner, I allowed myself to sink back into my chair. My hands were shaking, not from age or confusion, but from the effort of restraint. Every instinct had screamed to show him everything immediately, to vindicate myself, to expose Gertrude's manipulation for exactly what it was. But Patrick's voice had echoed through every moment of that conversation. Timing is everything. Show your hand too early, and she'll destroy your credibility. Wait until you have overwhelming, irrefutable evidence. 3 days. I'd promised Troy answers in 3 days. Patrick better have everything ready. My phone rang almost immediately. Patrick's name on the screen. I answered, still staring out the window at the empty street. "Wilfred, we have a problem," he said, no preamble. "Can you come to my office right now?" "What kind of problem?" "The kind that can't wait. I just discovered something in the financial analysis. Something that changes everything." "How bad?" "Bad enough that we need to move faster than we planned." "How soon can you get here?" I was already grabbing my keys. 2 hours. Drive carefully, but drive fast." The line went dead. I stood in my entryway, keys in hand, trying to process the sudden shift. 3 days had seemed like forever. Now Patrick was saying we needed to move faster? I locked the door and headed for my car, the afternoon sun already beginning its descent toward the mountains. Whatever Patrick had discovered, it was serious enough to warrant urgency in a man who measured everything in careful, methodical steps. The drive to Aspen passed in a blur of mountain scenery I barely registered. My mind churned through possibilities. Financial problems, legal complications, something in the evidence that made it inadmissible. I'd find out soon enough. Patrick's office lights were on when I arrived, though most of the building was dark. Late afternoon pushing toward evening. I climbed the stairs 2 at a time, as quickly as my 67-year-old knees would allow, and found him at his desk, surrounded by financial documents that seemed to have multiplied since my last visit. "Come in," he said, not looking up from the spreadsheet on his computer. "Close the door." I did, settling into the chair across from him. He pulled off his reading glasses, rubbed his eyes, then met my gaze with an expression I hadn't seen before, something between anger and professional urgency. "The forensic accountant finished his deep analysis this morning," Patrick said. "I asked him to trace every significant transaction from Troy and Gertrude's joint accounts over the past year. What he found," he shook his head, "Wilfred, this is worse than we thought." He turned his computer screen toward me, showing a spreadsheet dense with numbers. His finger tracked down a column highlighted in red. "These are transfers to an account in the Cayman Islands. $83,000 over the past 8 months. Small amounts at first, 3,000, 5,000. Then larger, 15,000 at a time. The pattern started last October and accelerated in March." I stared at the numbers, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. "Troy doesn't know about this account." "I'm certain he doesn't. It's in Gertrude's name only. The money was transferred from their joint account, in increments, calculated to stay below reporting thresholds. Someone advised her on how to do this without triggering automatic bank reviews." "The 15,000 Raymond mentioned? That was just the most recent withdrawal? Look at the total." He circled a figure at the bottom of the column. "She's systematically stripped $83,000 from your son's finances. Money he earned, saved, borrowed against the house for, and she's hidden it where he can't touch it." I remembered Troy mentioning the mortgage refinancing in March, how excited he'd been about the opportunity to consolidate debt, improve their cash flow. I'd encouraged him to do it, told him it was smart financial planning. They'd borrowed against the house to give Gertrude more money to steal. "How is this possible?" I asked, my voice rougher than I intended. "How did we not see this pattern earlier?" "Because the initial financial review focused on spending, credit cards, restaurants, hotels. This required deep analysis of transfer patterns, tracing account relationships, subpoenaing records from offshore institutions. It took time." Patrick pulled out another document. "But here's what worries me most. 2 days ago, right after Troy started questioning her, Gertrude transferred another 20,000. She's accelerating. either preparing to run or protecting assets before divorce proceedings. Can we stop her? Yes, but it requires immediate action. He slid papers across the desk. I need your authorization to file an emergency motion to freeze all accounts, joint and individual. We cite evidence of ongoing financial fraud and flight risk. If the judge grants it, which I believe she will given this documentation, Gertrude won't be able to move another dollar. I picked up the papers, scanned the legal language. How fast can this happen? If we file tomorrow morning, hearing by end of day. Decision within 24 hours? But once we file, everything becomes public. Gertrude will know we've discovered the fraud. She'll lawyer up, potentially try to move remaining assets before the freeze takes effect. It's going to be a race. What about Troy? When do we tell him? Patrick leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. You promised him answers in 3 days. That's perfect timing. We file tomorrow, get the accounts frozen, then show him everything at once. The affair, the fraud, the offshore account, all of it. One comprehensive package that leaves no room for doubt or manipulation. He's going to be devastated. He's going to be protected. If we wait even a week longer, Gertrude could drain everything. The equity from the house, their savings, his retirement accounts, if she can access them. This woman isn't just cheating on your son. She's destroying his financial future. I thought about Troy's face earlier today, his confusion, his torn loyalty, his desperate desire to believe everyone was acting in good faith. In 3 days, his entire world would collapse, but at least he'd still have a financial foundation to rebuild from. What do you need from me? I asked. Sign these authorizations. They give me power to act on your behalf in filing the motion, freezing the counts, and requesting emergency relief. Then go home. Act normal. Don't contact Troy unless he contacts you. Let him think everything is proceeding on the 3-day timeline. Meanwhile, I'll work with the accountant to prepare the complete evidence package. I signed where he indicated, each signature feeling heavier than the last. When I finished, Patrick gathered the documents into a folder marked with red tabs. One more thing, he said. When Troy sees this, all of it, he's going to need support. Not legal support, emotional support. This is going to break something in him. His trust, his confidence, maybe his faith in his own judgment. You need to be prepared for that. I've been preparing for 20 days. You've been preparing to show him evidence. That's different from helping him process what it means. Patrick's expression softened slightly. He's going to question everything, every moment of his marriage, every decision he made. He's going to wonder how he missed it, how he could have been so blind. You can't fix that for him. You can only be there while he works through it. I stood, suddenly feeling every one of my 67 years. Thank you, Patrick, for everything. Thank me when this is over. Right now, we still have 2 days of legal maneuvering ahead. Go home. Get some rest. Tomorrow morning, we go to war. The drive home was darker than the drive up had been. Night settling over the mountains, stars emerging in the clear sky. I thought about Troy as a boy, trusting everyone, believing the best in people. That openness had made him a wonderful teacher, a kind son, a loving husband. It had also made him an easy target. Gertrude had seen that trusting nature and exploited it systematically, methodically, for 8 months or longer. The affair was bad enough, a betrayal of intimacy and commitment. But the financial fraud was something else entirely. It was premeditated theft, calculated extraction of everything Troy had worked for. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Subject met Vaughn today. Lunch at Riverside Caf. 2 hours. Documentation complete. I texted back, thank you. Final report by tomorrow? Already drafted. We'll send by 8 a.m. Everything was converging. The surveillance evidence, the financial fraud documentation, the legal strategy. In 3 days, actually less now, more like 60 hours, I would sit down with Troy and show him the complete truth about his marriage. And Gertrude's carefully constructed world of deception would come crashing down around her. I pulled into my driveway, sat in the darkness of my car for a moment. Through the window, I could see my living room exactly as I'd left it. The coffee mug still on the table. The chair where Troy had sat, torn between defending his wife and trusting his father. In 3 days, he wouldn't be torn anymore. He'd know exactly who deserved his trust and who deserved nothing but legal consequences. 3 days felt like 3 years. I spent them preparing, organizing, double-checking every piece of evidence. Patrick filed the emergency motion to freeze accounts on day 2. By day 3, Friday morning, the manila folder sat on my dining table, thick with documentation, surveillance photographs, bank statements, witness statements from Lisa and Marcus. 8 months of systematic fraud, captured in paper and ink. Troy arrived at exactly 10 o'clock. He looked like he hadn't slept, dark circles shadowing his eyes, his jaw tight with tension. He stood in my doorway for a moment, just looking at me. "You said 3 days," he said. "It's been 3 days. Sit down." I gestured to the chair beside me at the table, not across from it. "What I'm about to show you will change everything." "Is it really that bad?" I placed the first photograph on the table. Gertrude and Darren entering the Glenwood Inn, his hand on the small of her back. Timestamp. 2 weeks ago. "It's worse than you imagine, but you need to see all of it." I didn't hand him the folder. Instead, I removed each piece one at a time, arranging them in chronological order. Photographs first. The visual impact hits harder than words. Gertrude and Darren at restaurants, in parking lots, outside his apartment, at hotels. Each image time-stamped, dated, geotagged. Troy picked up the third photograph with shaking hands. The Glenwood Inn again, this one showing them kissing beside Darren's car. "This was taken at the Glenwood Inn 2 weeks ago." His voice came out hollow. "I was in Denver for work." "I know." "She told me she was visiting her sister. Her sister lives in Arizona." "She lied. She's been lying for months." He set the photograph down carefully, as if it might shatter. His posture was changing, starting upright and defensive, gradually slumping forward until his elbows rested on his knees, head in his hands. I laid out the financial documents next. Bank statements with highlighted transfers, the offshore account information, the totals circled in red. Troy read them slowly, his finger tracing the numbers. $83,000. To where? Cayman Islands, offshore account in her name only. His jaw clenched. When he spoke, his voice carried a quiet fury I'd never heard before. "We've been arguing about money. She said we couldn't afford new furniture, couldn't take a vacation, said we needed to be more careful with expenses, and she's been stealing." "Not stealing, planning her exit. You would have been left with a mortgage and empty accounts." He looked up at me then, and I saw my son break. Not tears, something worse. A terrible, cold understanding. "How long have you known?" "Since the mountain house. 3 weeks ago." "Why didn't you tell me then?" "Would you have believed me without proof?" He sat with that question for a long moment. Finally, "No, probably not." "She would have convinced you I was confused or malicious. She tried exactly that 3 days ago, claiming I had cognitive problems." I placed Lisa's witness statement on the table. "This way, the evidence speaks for itself." He read through Marcus's surveillance report, the detailed timeline, 8 meetings over 7 days, hotels booked under false names, credit card charges for gifts Troy never received. "I thought she loved me," he said quietly. My hand touched his shoulder briefly, not pity, just contact, presence. "You married who she pretended to be. That's not your failure." He stayed for 2 more hours, going through everything, asking questions, processing the systematic nature of her deception. When he finally stood to leave, his face was set in grim determination. "I'm going home. I'm confronting her tonight. Do you want me to come?" "No. This conversation has to be between us." He paused at the door. "But I'll call you after." He left. I cleaned up the evidence, returned everything to the folder, and waited. The call came 3 hours later. I was standing in my kitchen when my phone rang, Troy's name on the screen. "It's done." His voice sounded flat, drained. I could hear his truck engine running, the hollow acoustics of speakerphone. "What happened?" "She tried everything. Denied it first, said the photos were manipulated, that you'd orchestrated everything because you hated her. Then when I showed her the bank statements, she crumbled, called it a mistake, said she'd pay everything back." He laughed, bitter and short. "I asked her about Darren. She had no answer for that." "Where is she now?" "At the house. I packed a bag. She tried to stop me, grabbed my arm, begged me not to leave. Then she called Darren, right there in front of me. Called him 5 times while I was packing. He never answered." Another bitter laugh. "She kept calling. Voicemail every time. I think she finally realized he's gone. The moment this became real, he disappeared. Where are you now? Sitting in a parking lot trying to figure out where to go? Come back here. I'll leave the door unlocked. Okay? His voice cracked slightly. Dad, thank you for protecting me, even when it hurt. He arrived an hour later carrying a duffel bag. I showed him to his old bedroom, the one he'd slept in as a teenager. We didn't talk much. What was there to say? Neither of us slept well that night. I heard him moving around at 3 a.m, getting water, pacing in the hallway. I stayed in my room, giving him space to process. Morning came gray and cold. I made coffee while Troy sat silently at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. We drove separately to Patrick's office. Troy needed to feel in control of something, even if it was just his own steering wheel. Patrick had documents prepared. He walked Troy through each one with professional compassion, explaining what he was signing and why. Troy, I need you to understand what we're filing. Divorce based on adultery and financial fraud. We're seeking full asset protection and recovery of stolen funds. Your accounts have been frozen as of yesterday afternoon. Gertrude can't move any more money. Will she fight it? Her lawyer might try. But with this evidence, they have no ground to stand on. The surveillance is time-stamped and professionally documented. The financial records show systematic fraud. Your father's witness, Lisa Thornton, is a real estate professional with no stake in the outcome. It's airtight. Troy signed where Patrick indicated. His hand was steady. When he finished, he set down the pen and looked at Patrick directly. Then let's finish this. I sat to the side during the entire meeting, just present for support. This was Troy's decision, Troy's signature, Troy's future. My part was done. I'd gathered the truth and protected him from further theft. Now he was taking control of his own life. We left Patrick's office an hour later. The divorce papers had been filed. The emergency motions had been submitted to the judge. The legal machinery was grinding forward, inevitable and thorough. Troy stood beside his truck in the parking lot, keys in hand. What do I do now? He asked. Not rhetorically, an actual question. You heal. You rebuild. You remember that none of this was your fault. Doesn't feel that way. It will, eventually. He got in his truck and drove away. I watched him go, then got in my own car and headed home. The folder of evidence sat on my passenger seat, no longer needed for revelation, but still necessary for legal proceedings. 3 weeks ago, I'd walked into my mountain house and found my son's wife with another man. Today, the truth was finally out. The accounts were frozen. The evidence was filed. Gertrude's carefully constructed world had collapsed completely. No husband, no money, no lover to run to. Just consequences, arriving exactly as they should. The preliminary hearing came 2 weeks later. Judge Martinez was direct, reviewing the evidence without patience for weak arguments. Surveillance photos, financial records, offshore accounts, everything laid bare in open court. Gertrude sat with her attorney, isolated, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. No Darren beside her, no friends in the gallery. The judge's ruling was swift. Troy kept the house. $67,000 of the stolen $83,000 was recovered. Gertrude received $5,000 as temporary support, nothing more. No maintenance. The affair and fraud had stripped away any claim to Troy's assets. Outside the courthouse, Troy's shoulders seemed straighter, but his eyes held no satisfaction. I should feel vindicated, he said, but I just feel empty. That's normal, I told him. Justice achieved doesn't erase the pain. We drove to the mountain house that afternoon, reclaiming the space where everything began. Standing on the terrace, watching the mountains in afternoon light, Troy said, I want to repaint this room, change the furniture, make it different. We can do that. We spent the rest of the day planning renovations, paint colors, new layouts, small projects that would take weeks, practical conversation grounded in the physical world rather than loss and betrayal. As sunset painted the mountains gold, Troy finally spoke what had been weighing on him. Thank you for being patient, for building the case instead of just telling me. If you'd accused her without proof, she would have poisoned me against you. You'll never lose me, I said. The truth had been told. Evidence had spoken. Justice had been served. Gertrude faced her consequences. Troy had protection and a path forward. It wasn't a happy ending, but it was an honest one, and sometimes that's enough. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.